Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's feeling lively and happy. I see an awful lot of students that aren't doing midterms or papers, but I think you've made the right choice for this evening. Don't tell anybody I said that. And welcome to Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois. I just want you to know that Senator Durbin is a double Hoya, and his first degree was from the School of Foreign Service. So we're very proud. So you can whoop it up. I'm Carol Lancaster, the Dean of the School of Foreign Service. Glad to have you all here this evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Immigration Reform. This is the Institute for the Study of International Migration's 15th anniversary, and it's one of a series of meetings on immigration issues. And so we're so glad that we have had one of the most distinguished senators. I'm a Democrat, I have to tell you right now. I'm going to try to control that. These events are intended to mark the 15th anniversary of the Institute for the Study of International Migration, which is a wonderful institute here on campus that offers courses and a certificate and also opportunities for students to do research. It was founded in 1998. The Institute has established a firm reputation as a balanced, well-documented, and accessible research on one of the most important issues of the 21st century, the movement of millions of persons around the world, some in search of better economic opportunities, others safety from conflict and disasters, and still others a combination of both. I just have to say something a little personal here. I was really very sad in regard to refugees, in this case Syrian refugees, to hear that there's been an outbreak of polio in Syria. And this, of course, is one of the things that happens when you have massive conflict and chaos and people moving and so on. So it's a very sobering story. Susan Martin, sitting over there at the end, is the director of the Institute, and her colleagues Andrew Schoenholtz and Lindsay Lowell came to Georgetown when the Federal Commission on Immigration Reform concluded. From the beginning, U.S. immigration policy has been one of the principal interests on their research agenda. And their aim has been to deepen understanding of this complex and sometimes emotional issue. And, it should be an issue, I think, dear to all of our hearts, because I would be willing to say there's nobody in this room who isn't either an immigrant or a child of immigrants or a grandchild of immigrants. My particular ones came from Italy and Ireland, and places I probably don't even know about. So we are all immigrants in this country, really. We've benefited greatly from the work of the Institute and from Susan and her colleagues, and has made us, it's really put Georgetown in many ways on the map on issues of migration, and so it gives us a special opportunity to talk about immigration in the United States. Now, in the note I was given, and I hope this is true, it says, the prospects for immigration reform are better today than they have been in years. Inshallah, as they say, I hope that's true. But we don't know what the fate of the pending legislation will be, and we just have to hope and do what we can to support its passage. And even if it passes, we still have monumental challenges to work through to implement legislation. And that legislation, in fact, is only the first step in the policy change, the implementation. We'll have lots of challenges, and all of you, when you start looking for jobs, will find plenty of jobs out there, because it's not going to happen overnight. So we are grateful to the MacArthur Foundation, which happens to be headquartered in Chicago, and led by my predecessor as Dean of the School of Foreign Service, Bob Gallucci. So we've got our tentacles everywhere. And we're grateful for their support for these important activities. There have been few people who have been more pivotal than Senator Richard Durbin in moving reform forward. He's been particularly active in pushing for reforms that will help young, undocumented migrants achieve their dreams. Georgetown has its share of dreamers, and our university community is grateful for your leadership in this important issue. Before I introduce our next speaker, Kim, sitting in the middle there, who will introduce the senator, let me say how great a privilege it is to welcome Senator Durbin back to the Hilltop. Some of you might become senators too one day, and we will welcome you back as well. As a graduate of the School of Foreign Service and Georgetown University Law Center, he has been an inspiration to the students who followed in his footsteps, and to some of us as well, or many of us. So thank you for being here, Senator Durbin. Now I would like to introduce Kim. Kim is a junior in the School of Foreign Service, majoring in culture and politics with a focus on documentary film and migrants' rights. She was born in Germany to Kenyan parents. She has lived in the United States since the age of 2. And she will now say a few words about her own experience and then introduce the senator. So, Kim, come to the podium.
On October 18th, 2011, I had the honor of hearing Senator Dick Durbin speak during my freshman year of college at Georgetown. I remember quite vividly how he described the stories of the many young people he had met who came from immigrant backgrounds and made incredible sacrifices to fight for themselves and for their families, since he began his fight for immigration reform himself over a decade ago. For me, these stories were particularly powerful because I am an undocumented immigrant. I came to the United States when I was 2 years old, and since I've been fighting for the right to remain in this country that I call home. Senator Durbin has been and continues to be a champion in this fight, the fight for the DREAM Act, and for more comprehensive immigration reform. On August 1st, 2001, when the DREAM Act, the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, was introduced in the Senate by Dick Durbin, I was an energetic third grader in Ms. Schneider's elementary school class. My parents received the news of the legislation with so much hope that day, hopefully, their young girl's life would change for the better. Soon after, Senator Durbin would begin a more than decade-long fight to pass the DREAM Act and better the lives of young people in my situation. On December 8th, 2010, the House of Representatives passed the DREAM Act. I was a senior in high school, finalizing my college applications. I had only recently become aware of my immigration status, about four months earlier. My parents watched hopefully, again, but cautiously, as my last opportunity before my 18th birthday to change my immigration status failed to move forward and pass in the Senate. On June 15th, 2012, President Barack Obama announced deferred action for childhood arrivals, a directive inspired by Senator Durbin's work on the DREAM Act that would halt the deportation of certain young undocumented immigrants and provide them with driver's licenses and temporary work permits. I was in the summer before my sophomore year of college, and on this Saturday morning, my mother called me crying and saying that her prayers had been answered. My life was about to change. My life was about to get a lot easier with this directive. And finally, on June 27th, 2013, Senator Dick Durbin, along with a group of bipartisan congressmen, announced the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill. And I was truly inspired by what I saw as a legislation that would not only provide a pathway for me, but for my family and many other families across this country. This is Senator Durbin's work on immigration, as it has affected my own life, but it has affected so many other young people, so many mothers and fathers and communities across the United States. Thank you, Senator Durbin, for fighting for me, for my family, for my community, and for our country, the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Dean Lancaster, who had to leave, but her kind words were greatly appreciated. I know the School of Foreign Service is in good hands. I want to thank our co-hosts, the Lecture Fund, Georgetown Democrats, Hoyas for Human Rights. I also want to thank Susan Martin, ISIM's director, and Kimberly, thank you. That was a great introduction. Forgive me for a moment if I get personal and then start talking about immigration. This is such a cool place. This is about the third time I've ever been on this stage, and each time I think back to when I was a student and would peek in here and wonder what in the heck's going on in this place. It was just beautiful. It's been restored, as this is such a beautiful campus. And there used to be this amazing library right down the way here. I don't know if it's still there, but we used to sneak in there before the Lowinger Library was built. How did I get to Georgetown School of Foreign Service? Well, I'd like to tell you the story that at age of 10, I said my lifelong ambition. It didn't quite work that way. I was a student. I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, and I commuted to St. Louis University, another Jesuit school. And I drive back and forth to school every day. And after a few months, I thought, this isn't college. This doesn't feel right. I want to go away to school. And so I went up to the library, Pius X Library at St. Louis University, Pius XII Library at St. Louis University, and there was this long stack of catalogs for colleges. And I started going through there like I was shopping at Amazon. You know, I'm going through there looking at each of these, and I picked out two of them. I thought, these places look very cool. And now all I have to do is convince my mother. My father had passed away. My mom was trying to raise me in my rambunctious state, and I had to go home and convince her. So I went home and I said, Mom, I've got to go away to school. Well, you can't afford it. Oh, I've got it all figured out. I was making this all up. I've got it all figured out. And she said, well, where do you want to go to school? Now, my mother, and this fits into the speech, was an immigrant. She came to America from Lithuania, brought here at the age of 2. In her time, it was not unusual for people to stop going to school in the 8th grade. Neither my mother nor my father went beyond the 8th grade. But my mom was a very smart lady, not just street smart. She was a person who read books and studied, and she knew a lot. So here I am presenting her with my college choices. And I showed her this catalog. And she said, what is this? I said, Stanford University. And she says, wow, look at this. Mountains, palm trees. This is really, where is it? She said. I said, California. She said, no way. You are not going to California. I will never see you again. Out goes Stanford. I handed her the next catalog. Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. And she said, where's this? And I said, it's in Washington, D.C. Oh, she said, your brother works in St. Louis for the federal government. He goes out to Washington, D.C. every few months. He can look in on you. And so I applied to Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. It's a true story. And I ended up getting accepted, transferring out here. And to all of you at Georgetown, whether it's School of Foreign Service, college, wherever it might be, you're darn lucky. This is a great university. And it made such a difference in my life. From where I was in East St. Louis with no knowledge of international affairs or foreign service, to come out to Georgetown just opened doors I couldn't even dream of. And the law school, the same way. So it cost a ton of money, I know, but it is a great university, and you're fortunate to be here. Let me talk about human migration, immigration. They estimate that it was 75,000 years ago that a group of Africans were able to cross the Red Sea into the Arabian Peninsula. That was the first migration, human migration, which we can find some record of. And that migration eventually made its way to Europe, and it populated the world. Now, we're all different here, right? All of us have a different background, come from different places. But if you search the DNA of every single person in this room, or every person in an Amazon jungle, an Eskimo in China, you will find a trace of the DNA of those first immigrants, those first migrants. It brings us all together. We were immigrants before we knew it, moving from one place to another. And certainly this is a nation of immigrants. The last time I spoke on this stage was 2 years ago, and I spoke about the need to fix the broken immigration system. I know it'll come as a shock to you, but Congress hasn't quite gotten it done over the last 2 years. The good news is we're closer than we've ever been. It'll take a major effort to pass comprehensive immigration reform, but we have a chance. And when we pass it, I will guarantee you that it'll contain the provision which I insisted on when we put this bill together, which is the DREAM Act, which Kimberly spoke of, so that brave young people like Kimberly are finally going to get their chance to be citizens in the United States of America. In my time, in my day, it was the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War and a few other major issues of the 60s. During the Civil Rights Movement, hearts and minds weren't changed by debates. They were changed by a lot of brave people. One of them was the congressman from Atlanta, Georgia, John Lewis. He had the courage to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the March on Selma. He was knocked unconscious by a billy club-wielding trooper, but he didn't give up. And if you look back to that civil rights movement, you'll find something else that's interesting. In every single instance in modern history, and possibly further back, you will find that the great social change movements, the civil rights movements, the human rights movements, many of these were energized by young people, students, with idealism, energy, and a willingness to defy the system. Over and over and over again, this immigration reform is no different. When I introduced the bill that Kimberly spoke of years ago, I used to go around Chicago, and I'd speak in Hispanic communities. And almost without fail, I'd come out of these speeches, and there would be somebody standing by my car, usually a young woman. And she would look around, and when she realized we were alone, she said, "Senator, I'm one of those dreamers." Afraid to declare that she was undocumented. And why? Because she'd been raised in families that said, be careful, because one arrest can lead to deportation of not just you, but the whole family. I can't even imagine what it'd be like to live like that. But that's what it was and what it is for so many who are here in America. An interesting thing happened over time. These dreamers who were so careful, rooting for this bill to pass, but so careful not to disclose who they were, decided it was time to step up. And they stepped up and told the world who they were. And their stories made all the difference in the world. Some of them were courageous enough to let me tell their stories on the floor of the United States Senate. I've done it 54 times. Color photographs of dreamers. Amazing stories, one after the other after the other. And I know, because I do this for a living, when people are listening. Most of the time the Senate's empty, right? But even the presiding officer will stop when I tell dreamer stories, and all the pages will watch, and the folks in the gallery would watch. Because when you tell these stories and put a face and a life behind your cause, it makes all the difference in the world. One of the hardest days I've ever had as a United States Senator was in Christmas season 2010. It was almost 9 years after I first introduced the DREAM Act, and it was coming up for a vote. By this time, the Dreamers were in force, and they were filling the galleries on the day of this, it was a Saturday, of this important vote. Many of them were wearing caps and gowns to let people know, we're graduates of high school, we want to be graduates of college. Some were wearing ROTC uniforms. They packed the galleries for this big, decisive, historic Senate vote on the DREAM Act. We called it for a vote. We had 55 votes that day. A strong majority out of 100 members in the Senate, but not enough to break the filibuster. It took 60 votes. I walked off that Senate floor, and I saw a lot of those dreamers. They were standing there in tears and in stunned silence. We went downstairs and met in a room in the Capitol. They were hugging one another, and they were pretty sad, as you might imagine. I said to them, "I'm never giving up on you. Don't give up on me." And I mean it. There may be some dreamers here tonight besides Kimberly, and I want you to all know that I'm going to keep that promise. We are going to get this done. We're going to pass the DREAM Act, and we're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform. A little over 2 years ago, I wrote a letter to the president. I know him personally, but I wanted to write a letter. And it was co-signed by Dick Lugar, Republican senator from Indiana. And we asked President Obama to consider deferring deportation of young people eligible for the DREAM Act. It didn't happen. There wasn't a response. They said they were looking into it. A year passed. A year. We sent a second letter, this time signed by 22 senators, urging President Obama to do this. And the president did. 16 months ago, June of 2012, the president used the power of his office to put in place DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It gives the Dreamers a chance to apply for deferred action, which puts on hold their deportation and allows them on a temporary basis to live, work legally in America, and go to school. That was an historic moment. To date, more than 430,000 DACA applications have been approved. It's an act of prosecutorial discretion, though. It's not the law. It can be reversed by a future president. So we still need to pass the law. We need to pass the DREAM Act and comprehensive immigration reform. And let me tell you what we risk if we don't. Juan Gomez, Hoya class of 2011. Juan was 2 years old, his brother was 3 when his family finally came to this country from Colombia. His father applied for political asylum. He had a brother who'd been killed by guerrilla fighters, but his asylum request was denied. By that time, the Gomez family had moved to Florida. The parents started a small catering business, and the boys started school. Now fast forward. Juan goes to high school, takes 15 AP classes, graduates near the top of his class. Weeks after graduation, immigration officers came to his home to deport the entire family. While Juan was sitting in the deportation facility, his friends started a Facebook campaign to get him out. Media picked up on it, then a few members of Congress chimed in. Juan and his brother were granted permission to stay in the U.S. temporarily, but their parents were going to be deported to Colombia. Later, Juan would learn that his parents went 3 years living in the most abject poverty in Colombia, without water, without electricity. When this university, Georgetown University, heard the story of Juan, they offered him a full scholarship. And while he was here, he maintained an A average, lobbied on the Hill for the DREAM Act, and graduated from Georgetown magna cum laude. After he graduated, Juan landed a job with J.P. Chase in New York. He was earning enough to live in Manhattan. Not bad, huh? And help support his brother in Florida, his parents in Colombia. He was living the dream, and then it all ended. His temporary work permit expired in May. While his DACA application was still pending, J.P. Chase put him on unpaid leave. In July, a recruiter from a Brazilian investment firm asked him to move. In August, Juan Gomez packed his belongings and moved to Sao Paulo. He's working for that brokerage firm, making good money, with little chance of ever returning to the United States. That is the kind of loss that we suffer. That is the kind of brain drain we suffer until we pass the DREAM Act and fix this broken immigration system. There are a lot of other problems with the system that go beyond the dreamers. 11 million undocumented people in this country living in the shadow, many of them being exploited on a daily basis. An employer who hires them and says, "I'll pay you in cash," doesn't have to worry not only about any withholding, but certainly standards of safety in the workplace. Exploitation takes place every day, and sometimes these workers, after putting in a full day, are told, "Sorry, we're paying you nothing." Which of those workers will go to the police to report it? None. These people living in the shadows create question marks too. Who are they? Where do they work? Where do they live? From a security viewpoint, we're not a more secure nation because we don't know who they are. We're less secure. So where does comprehensive immigration reform stand today? There's some encouragement. President Obama once again said, after the government reopened, he was going to make it a top priority. And just yesterday, John McCain, proud Republican, former candidate for president, was with me in Chicago, and he too pledged his commitment to comprehensive immigration reform. Here's where we are. Beginning at the end of last year, we started a group of 8 senators, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, to sit down and write the comprehensive immigration bill. On their side of the table, John McCain, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Jeff Flake of Arizona. On our side of the table, Chuck Schumer of New York, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee. Myself, Bob Menendez of New Jersey, Michael Bennett of Colorado, and a good group of staff people who worked very hard. And we put together an effort to write a comprehensive immigration bill. It took us 8 months, 40 face-to-face meetings with the 8 of us, issues that couldn't be resolved by staff. Finally, we hammered it out, over 650 pages long. Sent it to the Senate Judiciary Committee where it passed, with a bipartisan vote reporting it to the floor. After it came to the floor and faced some amendments, it was enacted by the Senate with a vote of 68 in favor, 14 Republicans, joining the 54 Democrats to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Now, it's been almost 6 months since that happened. It's been sent to the House of Representatives. Now it's their turn. The big issue is math, basic math. We need 218 votes to pass this in the U.S. House of Representatives. Most of the 201 Democrats are likely to support it. That means we need about 20 Republicans to join us. Speaker Boehner has said he'll allow the House to vote on legislation if a majority of the Republicans support it. You may have heard this recently on the government shutdown. It's called the Hastert Rule, named after a former Illinois Congressman, Dennis Hastert, who was a speaker. That same rule, when used by Speaker Boehner, shut down our nation's government for 16 days. For comprehensive immigration reform to pass under this interpretation, the Hastert Rule means that 120 Republicans have to support it. Not 20, 120. That's not likely. There may be another way to get this done, though. The House is talking about taking up sections of the bill. I don't like that approach, but it may be the only approach. The question then is, if they pass a section of the bill, can we go into a conference committee and bring in other parts of the bill for consideration? At that point, would the Speaker let the entire U.S. House of Representatives vote on a bipartisan basis? These are unanswered questions. But I have faith that it's going to move forward, and I'll tell you why. I've never seen such an amazing coalition in support. In addition to Democrats and Republicans, business and labor, we have the major religious groups supporting us. Happy to say the Catholic Church is behind it strongly. Most major religions, including the evangelicals, who are an important part of this equation when it comes to Republican votes and even some Democratic votes, they support it. This is an amazing coalition that also includes Silicon Valley, as well as farmers and farm workers, because we have an agricultural section in the bill. We know that this is good for the economy. It's been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. They say it's going to save us $1.4 trillion in the next decade and create more than 1 million new jobs. Now, let me tell you another reason why we should do this, beyond the dreamers and beyond the 11 million undocumented. Earlier this month, Nobel Prizes were announced. The United States won 9 in the sciences, the most of any nation. 4 of the 9 U.S. Nobel Prize winners this year are immigrants. No fluke. Researchers at George Mason University in Virginia went back and looked at the Nobel Prize winners since they first started the award in 1906. They found the United States has produced more science Nobel laureates than any other nation in the world by far, and 1/4 of all the United States Nobel laureates were immigrants to America. Now let me tell you another story about a man I knew right here. The contributions of immigrants go far beyond the sciences. I told you about the government shutdown. There was a point there where I got so darn depressed that it was Columbus Day, about 2 weeks ago. Remember that? I said, I've got to get out of Capitol Hill. I'm going crazy. And so I got up early in the morning and caught the metro to DuPont Circle and got off and caught the good old D2 bus. And I took the D2 bus right up here to the campus. And I don't know what you were all doing, but you must have been sleeping in or you're gone. It was pretty empty. And I walked around. And I walked over by White Gravener. And over there, just beyond White Gravener, is a statue. You've probably seen it, a bronze statue. It shows a man sitting on a bench playing chess. That man's name was Jan Karski. I had the privilege of taking a class from Jan Karski when I was a student at the School of Foreign Service. Incredible man. He came into the class every day, suit and white starched shirt and crisp tie, sat like a ramrod in his chair and lectured us on modern foreign governments. I didn't know all his story, but I came to learn it. Jan Karski was a leader in the Polish resistance during World War II. During the war, he was imprisoned by the Soviets and tortured by the Gestapo. In 1942, Jan Karski risked his life to take the message about what was happening in the Warsaw Ghetto and the extermination camps to leaders in the Allied nations. Nobody believed him. They thought his accounts of the Holocaust were too horrendous to be true. He came to the United States and, frankly, was rejected by the leaders in government when he told them the truth about what was happening with the Holocaust. After the war, Jan Karski returned. He earned a PhD from Georgetown, became an American citizen, and he taught here for more than 40 years. He died in the year 2000. He challenged me and a lot of students at this school to think about the moral implications of political and foreign policy. Last year, President Obama awarded to Immigrant Professor Jan Karski posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor our government can confer on a civilian. Another American immigrant story. Last year, I had the privilege of administering the oath of office to a new federal district judge in Chicago. His name is John Lee. He was born in Germany to Korean parents. Like my mom, John Lee came to this country when he was just a baby. As I said, my mom came at the age of 2. Judge Lee came when he was 4. His father had been a coal miner. His mother was a nurse. His family started out in a crowded one-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago. He worked hard in school, ended up graduating with honors from both Harvard and Harvard Law School. After law school, he went to work for a big firm, made a lot of money, but didn't like it. He wanted to go into public service, and he went to work at the U.S. Justice Department. Later, he practiced law in the Chicago area. As it happened, the courtroom that they used to swear him in as a federal district court judge was the same courtroom where he'd gone through the naturalization ceremony as a young boy. On the day he was sworn in, he told an interesting story about America from the eyes of a Korean immigrant who had been successful. He talked about coming to this country unable to speak a word of English, how he grew up in a household that spoke Korean, how his mother walked him to school and stopped him across the street from school and said, "Before you go into that school, we have to give you a name." And he said, "I have a name. My name is Jan Lee." She said, "Jan is not an American name. You need another name that's American. So I've got some written down here. Tell me which one you like." Robert? No. William? No. George? No. John? He said, "That sounds like Jan." "Okay, you're John Lee." He walks across the street into the classroom. New John Lee, speaking no English. He told the story how in that first class, the teacher had an art class as part of the day and said to the students to bring something from home the next day as part of their art project. Young Jan, John Lee, went home to his mom and in Korean said, "The teacher told me to bring a can of beans to school tomorrow." And his mother said, "A can of beans?" That's what she said, can of beans. Mother said, "Luckily we have a can of beans," gave it to him, put it in his backpack, off he went to school. The art class got started, and so the teacher said, "Everybody pull out what I told you to bring from home." John reached in, pulled out his can of beans, and he looked around. All the other students had boxes of cereal. He misunderstood her. Teacher walked over, grabbed the can of beans, and said, "John, I've got your box of cereal right here." His story was not just about his life experience as a young boy, but about the generosity of people toward those who come to this country. It's true. Everyone can tell a story if they're recent immigrants or know someone who has been. By welcoming immigrants, the generosity is repaid many times over and always has been in America. Let me close by telling you a story about one other child of an immigrant. His parents moved from Italy to Argentina before he was born. His father had dreams of becoming rich. Then the Depression hit. The family lost everything. There was no work. Those early experiences created in that young boy a deep empathy for migrants, for the poor, and for people on the margins of life. He decided that he wanted to go to the seminary and become a Jesuit priest. Today he's known as Pope Francis. The moment I heard that our new pope was a Jesuit, I thought, this is going to be very interesting. And it has been. I've been inspired so many times in the last few months by his words and his actions. He's spoken out frequently and forcefully about the need for treating migrants and asylum seekers justly. His first official trip as Pope outside Rome was in June to the tiny Sicilian island of Lampedusa. The island is a main gateway for undocumented immigrants fleeing Africa and the Middle East for Europe. The Pope said he was moved to go to Lampedusa after 13 African migrants died just off the island's coast. Earlier this month, another smuggler's boat sank off the coast of the island, killing more than 360 African migrants, believed to be the largest loss of life in the Mediterranean Sea. During the Pope's visit to the island in June, he said Mass using as an altar the hull of a smuggler's boat that had sunk off the coast. After leaving the island, he tweeted, the Pope tweeted, "We pray for a heart which will embrace immigrants. God will judge us upon how we have treated the most needy." Morally, socially, economically, for our nation's own security, it is time to make our immigration laws conform once again to America's values. After a long struggle, we are almost there. Now I want to hear what you have to say, and I'll try my best to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As you know, that speech was fantastic, and the senator has agreed to take some questions. Consistent with our tradition here, students come first. You get a chance to ask your questions. If we have time afterwards, we'll take questions from others. As you can see, there's a microphone already set up in the center aisle. When you reach, it's your turn to speak. Please let us know your name, which school at Georgetown you're in, and your hometown. And please do keep your questions brief so that we can take as many questions as possible. And if you just line up at the back, it'll facilitate things.
Thanks.
And I'll let you take
it away. First question, please.
Hi, Senator Durbin. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. My name is Will. I'm from Chicago, and I'm a sophomore in the School of Foreign Service and an applicant to be an intern for you next semester.
Got a resume?
So I've got my cover letter actually at my seat, but hopefully I'll be seeing you next semester. Anyway, my question is, I was a field organizer in the 2012 Obama campaign in New Hampshire, and I was specifically working with the Latino demographic. And one of the major challenges I confronted was Latinos who correctly pointed out that Obama's deportation rate was higher than Bush's, surprisingly. People might not know that. And obviously I'm on Obama's side, but I grappled with the issue of explaining why that was and kind of had to dodge around a few things and use some political language and so on. I'm wondering if you can explain, obviously the issue is past now, but kind of offer a perfect explanation as to why that was and maybe how we can solve that problem moving forward. Thank you.
Well, I love this president. I encouraged him to run for president. I was the first senator to endorse him when he ran for president, and for 14 months I was the only senator who endorsed him. So I hope it tells you what I think about him and what I feel about him, and my voting record reflects it. I've stood by him on virtually all of his major legislative efforts. And as you can tell, I've tried to use my friendship to get some things done, like DACA. And he's been very receptive and was an original co-sponsor of the DREAM Act. I have no doubt about his commitment to comprehensive immigration reform. I cannot explain the deportations. I understand and support the deportation of those with criminal background. I think we've got to make it clear, and we make it clear in the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, that you can disqualify yourself from ever being legal in the United States by committing crime, serious crime. So I do not argue with the deportation of those who have been convicted of serious crime. However, the 400,000 or so that are being deported may match or even exceed previous years, but it goes way beyond those with criminal backgrounds. If near Chicago is a suburb called Broadview, and Broadview has a deportation detention facility. Every Friday morning, if you're up to it, you can join a couple of the best nuns America's ever seen, who get out there about 7:30 in the morning and pray the rosary for the people in that detention facility. I joined them for the rosary. I'm glad they didn't call on me to remember the mysteries, and then joined them for breakfast afterwards. And they are trying in their nonviolent, religious, and prayerful way to convince this government not to do this. I think they're right. I think that we should reduce these deportations. Those who are being deported for cause, for criminal cause, that's a fact, do it. But beyond that, I think we've got to find a way to stop these massive deportations. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you for being here, Senator. My name's Alex. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm a freshman in the college. Just briefly, will you be staying around for pictures? I always love to get a picture with the senators. And
Promise
I have
you'll
a real
put it
question.
on Facebook.
Yeah. I have a real question, though, also. Recently, the junior senator from Florida announced that he was in favor of a more piecemeal approach to immigration reform. I was wondering how you think this affects the prospects for immigration reform in the House and ultimate passage.
I was a little surprised. When we formed the group of 8 senators, I wanted Marco Rubio to be there. And so I said I'd go ask him if he would be part of it. Now, it may surprise some of you, knowing his politics and mine, that we're friends. We are for a very unusual reason. We both open the gym, the Senate gym, in the morning at 5:30. I go there almost every day for no apparent reason, but he goes there. But he and I both go there, and we've gotten to know one another. I like him. He's a good guy, and a good family, and good dad, all the rest of that. So I approached him in the gym, and I said, Marco, we're doing this comprehensive bill, but you can't come in and sit down with us unless you're for path to citizenship. That's the deal on the Republican side. You can't sit down unless you're for path to citizenship. On the Democratic side, we can't sit down unless we are willing to spend outrageous sums of money on border protection. That was the deal. That's how politics works, 101. He said, I'll come in, I'll do it. And he was a very valuable member of this negotiation. He's caught holy hell for it politically since. The right wing has just skewered him for what he did. And I don't know if that is behind his recent announcement or not. I've not spoken to him about it. I think it would be a mistake if we give up on comprehensive immigration reform, and almost impossible to do. For example, the business communities around America wants H-1B visas. They want to bring in skilled foreign workers. The agricultural community wants to bring in migrant workers to pick fruits and vegetables. There are pieces here that have commercial appeal. Those who are supporting comprehensive reform have said to these business and agricultural interests, you don't get what you want until we do everything, all of it, the DREAM Act, comprehensive reform. So this notion that we can pick off pieces of it, I don't think it's going to work. That's why we did the big bill. So I disagree with Marco's conclusion. I'll wait and see what the House does, what they send us, but I hope that we can build on it and not quit on one aspect of comprehensive reform. Okay?
Hello, my name is Bethan Saunders. I'm a freshman in the SFS, and I'm from California. And once again, thank you so much for being here. As a first-generation American, I'm helping my parents right now with their citizenship, and it's been a really, really long and difficult process. So my question for you is, what do you think are the first steps we have to take, or Congress has to take to make this path to citizenship easier?
Well, this path to citizenship is not easy. Anybody who calls this amnesty can't read, because here's what it says. If you're here undocumented, not a dreamer, if you're here undocumented and not a dreamer, you have to go forward and register with the government. This is a big leap of faith for a lot of people who have avoided the government. Now they have to register with the government. They have to register their name, their address, where they work, who lives in their house. And they go through a criminal background check. And like I said, if there's a serious crime in your background, it's over. You're not going to be able to be part of this program. However, if you qualify, if you are registered under our bill, then you have 10 years that you can stay in the United States legally, work in the United States, and this is very important, travel in and out of the United States. There are so many undocumented folks here who are stranded. They can't be there for the funerals in their family in Mexico or Poland or wherever it happens to be. And so now they'll be able to travel. But it's a 10-year wait. At the end of 10 years, and they're paying fines while this goes along, ultimately it's about $2,000 in fines over the entire period of time. At the end of the 10 years, they're now given green card status, and probably in 3 years will be citizens. So it is a long process. They don't go to the front of any line, and they wait while paying their fines for this opportunity to get a green card. And they are constantly monitored during this period. They have to learn English, which is part of it, but that's part of naturalization now. So that is the process that would be offered. Dreamers, better deal. That's why I was in the room. To make sure that these dreamers, right off the bat, are eligible for green cards. That's what I want to do, to make sure that they get a chance to become citizens more quickly. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Guadalupe Fernandez. I'm a senior in the Foreign Service from Blue Island, Illinois. And my question is, so you talked about the barriers in implementing citizenship, a path to citizenship, because we understand how the visa system leads to a lot of exploitation and things like that. My question is, how do we support people who are going to be applying for these visas and for the citizenship? So for example, the fees, what resources, and how can this be implemented is the question, and what resources will be provided?
Very important question, because you think about it. Those who are familiar with the DACA process, the deferred deportation process for potential dreamers, know what happened. There was a fee that had to be paid. I think it was $650 or somewhere in that range. Close? Anybody know for sure? $475? Is that it? Okay, $475. Substantial for a young person, but families were coming up with it. They wanted their kids to be protected. Then there was the second part of it, which was really troubling. All of a sudden, I was introduced to a new group of people who wanted to be part of the deal, notarios. These were folks who described themselves as the legal people to go to fill out this form. They were charging as much as $2,000 for it. Outrageous, terrible ripoff. Now, that dealt with about 500,000 who qualified for DACA. Think about 11 million. They're going to need help. They're going to need a system that is fair to them. If they have some complications, they may need legal help. It's possible, but most people will not. And they're going to be paying these fines in the process as they go through it. And remember what I said about English. We're going to have to dramatically expand the English as a second language opportunities in this country for all of these people who are going to want to move forward. I think this is all doable, and we raised revenue in the bill with the fines to put it back into paying for the expenses of processing and the like, so that this is budget neutral. It doesn't add to the deficit. So it is going to be a lengthy process, and it's going to be fraught with people exploiting those who are new to this country or don't speak English well or a little bit fearful of anything that has big government written all over it. But I think once we get into it, I believe that Congress can do a good job at trying to follow it and follow on with legislation if we need it. Okay?
Hi, Senator. My name is Christine Centino, and I'm a senior in more ways than one for the School of Continuing Studies. I come here as a granddaughter of an immigrant who when she crossed the border to Texas, ended up in Chicago. So go Sox. I'm here to ask you tonight if you can kind of share a little bit about if President Obama were to end deportations through an executive order, how do you feel about that? What are the possibilities of that happening?
I don't think it's likely to happen. I've asked, and I don't think they're of a mind to do it. But I'm going to keep asking. Okay?
Hi there, Senator. Thank you for coming. My name is Rowie Haydar. I'm a freshman in the School of Foreign Service here. And I was just wondering two things. One, about how your bill deals with like reforming the process of legal immigration, because that's something kind of personal to me. My mom came here and became a citizen through the whole process, and it was quite a long process, and I was wondering if there's any way that your bill clears that up and makes it a little easier. And secondly, a bit more of a practical question, like how do you expect to overcome the hurdles that are likely to come with strong Republican opposition to the bill and like delays to the bill, and how are you planning on dealing with that?
So my mother passed away about 17 years ago. And before she died, I was visiting with her in her apartment. And I said, I've never seen your naturalization certificate. Do you still have it? And she said, sure. And she got up. She wasn't getting around too well, but she got up pretty quickly and was gone a minute or two and came back and handed me a big brown envelope. And I reached in there and I pulled it out, and there was her naturalization certificate. And she was naturalized in 1932. And a beautiful photo of her as a young woman, a young mom. She'd been married and had 2 kids at the time. And then a little piece of paper flittered to the floor. And I reached down and picked up the piece of paper, and it was a tiny little piece of paper, and written on it was $2.50. And I said, what's this? She said, that's the receipt for the filing fee. And I said, why did you keep this? Here's my mom. If the government ever came and challenged me, I have the receipt, $2.50. So we didn't change much of legal naturalization processes, except in one category, family unification. Right now, there are family members all over the world trying to get here, to reunite with their families. Some of them have waited a long, long time, 10 years plus, 20 years. And so what we did was to say, we're going to expedite every pending application, all the pending applications. And we're going to leave it open, I think it's for 18 months, for new applications of family members to be reunited. This is a much more important issue in some communities than others, Asian communities in particular. However, at that point, we ran into a political problem. The other side of the table said, that's it. After 18 months, that's it. No more, they call chain migration, which is family gathering. And so at the end of that 18-month period, the members of the family who are eligible to come in because other members of the family are citizens is going to be much more limited. So I don't want to mislead you on that score. I would have voted the other way. I think bringing families together is a pretty cool thing and a pretty important thing, and much more important for some populations than others. And the last question you asked me was entirely political. And so for those of you who either worked in a campaign or studied, the last election for president, interesting thing happened. What was the largest percentage support for the President of the United States by group? African American. No surprise, right? What was third? Latino. What was second? Asian. And the point is that although we discuss this immigration issue, not exclusively, but primarily in Hispanic, Latino terms, there are many others watching this debate and following it carefully, including an Asian community, which is different than most of the Hispanic community. They're likely to be more entrepreneurial. They're likely to be higher education, so forth and so on. They're not likely to be, in many instances, the basic immigrant workers like my family. So what we have gathering here, the Republicans have to step back and look at this in terms of a very basic question. Are there enough white males in America to elect a Republican president? And the answer for smart Republicans like John McCain, who is very open about this, is we're crazy. And Lindsey Graham said, we're in a demographic death spiral in the Republican Party. This is a diverse nation becoming more diverse by the day, and more people are going to be voting in the future who aren't white males, white Americans. And so some Republicans embrace that and accept it on a national basis, and they're smart to do it. And think about this. The argument that passing this bill means the Republicans are doomed because all the Hispanics are going to start voting, our response to them was, you got 10 years to convince them. And if what you're selling as a Republican can't convince them in 10 years, you better change what you're selling. So they have a chance to win over Hispanic support if they support this whole effort, and to pay a heavy price if they don't. So I hope that we can get this done with Republican support. The last point I'll make to you is a simple political point. Who's from Virginia here? Some people from Virginia here? How many congressmen do you have in Virginia? 11. Okay. So here's my story. Virginia was a battleground state for President Obama. He carried Virginia. But you take a look at the congressional delegation. The congressional delegation came back, I think, 2-1, Republican over Democrat. The story there is if I can draw the map, I can elect Democrats in a Republican state and vice versa in most instances. It certainly was true in Virginia. These Republicans in districts where they were elected when Obama was elected president think this issue means nothing to them. They don't have to worry about it. Heck, I won. I got reelected as a Republican congressman in Virginia when President Obama was carrying the state. So don't tell me about needing to pass comprehensive immigration reform. I've always been against it. I'll be against it in the future. So that's the political dynamic when you bring in redistricting and gerrymandering and the congressional delegation when it comes to the House of Representatives. Okay? Thanks. Thank you. Get it? It was great to come back to the campus and look around. There aren't many things still there. The Tombs, where I bought my first legal beer. Wise Miller's, where I always bought a sandwich. That's still going, right? Yeah, that's cool. Not much else. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Senator, thank you so much for your remarks, but even more so for your leadership on immigration. I know from my 30 years working on these issues how difficult it is to get consensus of bipartisan agreement on immigration, and you and your colleagues on the Gang of Eight did a fantastic job of pulling a lot of strands together. I think many of us in the audience are hopeful that the House will...
If you're a leader on immigration reform, why don't you support the Dream 30? They're sitting in El Paso Detention Center, rodeo with them.
Excuse me.
They come to your office for 3 weeks asking for your support if your office has given them the runaround. Why don't you support these dreamers here?
We will be concluding our remarks unless...
I'll be glad to respond to it. These represent some 30 people who have crossed the border and are asking for asylum. They are young people claiming that they have fear of persecution in Mexico. And they are now going to have to go through the asylum process as to whether or not they have a legitimate fear of persecution. And there are standards, there are legal standards that they're going to have to live by. They are not technically dreamers, as our bill talks about, those who have come to the United States under the age of 16 and have lived here legally, or have lived here, I should say, and are seeking legal status after they finish school. So that's the difference. They are trying a different approach to get into the system. I can't change the fact that they're going to have to go through an asylum hearing, and they're going to face... What I can tell you is, what I'm telling you is they have chosen the route that they want to follow. It is a complex route. It requires an adjudication as to whether or not they are facing persecution because of 5 specific elements in the law. That is what they have chosen, and I can't change that law.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I ask that those of you who are in the audience please stay while our Illinois delegation up front will be taking off first. And please just join me in a last round of applause for Senator Durbin.